Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Indie Zone. My name is Kathy. One of the last people that the public understood saw two of the victims, Kaylee and Madison, alive. In the early morning hours of November 13th, 2022, was the private driver. That information was detailed as early as the affidavit of probable cause that was dated December 29th, 2022, signed under penalty of perjury by Detective Brett Payne, which asked for and was the basis for the warrant that was issued that day by Judge Megan E. Marshall for Mr. Kohberger's arrest. We have had the opportunity to review Sergeant Dustin Blaker's documentation, his report regarding his interview with the private driver, which occurred on the 14th of November 2022, which would have been the day after the catastrophic events at 1122 King Road. And there has now been audio of this interview circulating, which has filled in a few more details than the report did. But there are two lingering questions here that give us the opportunity to ask the rhetorical question of who got the timeline right regarding a key bit of information. Was it Judge Stephen J. Hippler, or was it Sgt.Blaker / the private driver, taken from one, Judge Hippler's court order, versus what the private driver told Sgt.Blaker during his interview of the 14th of November 2022, which, by the way, Sgt.Blaker did not write up until January 11th, 2023, which was signed by him under penalty of perjury that day and then reviewed by Corporal Brett Payne, both of the Moscow Police Department. The two issues that we would like to raise rhetorical questions regarding this report is, number one, why wasn't this interview videoed? This took place at the Moscow Police Department, where the day before, November 13th, there were a number of interviews, including those taken by Detective Payne and Sgt.Blaker, of various individuals concerning the tragedies at 1122 King Road, which were videoed. So the question is, why wasn't one of the last people known to see two of the four victims alive also subject to a video interview? The second question that brings us to a difference that appears between what Sgt.Blaker took down and what his report tells us regarding what the private driver told him versus what Judge Hippler stated in his court order. There is nothing here in this report that indicates the private driver texted one of the surviving roommates, as Judge Hippler indicated in his order on state's motion in limine regarding text messages and 911 call. At this time, the public has not seen these text messages. What we have to rely on right now is a chart that Judge Hippler refers to in this court order that is entitled Text Messages and Phone Activity, Exhibit A. And it says here the time, November 13th, 2022, the record and the ruling at 2:10 a.m. and 29 seconds. E.M. apparently sent a text to the driver inquiring if he was driving. And the ruling here is that this is not hearsay. The private driver apparently texted back 2:13 a.m. to DM confirming he was driving. This is also ruled as not hearsay. There is not a mention of this exchange in the recently released audio of the private driver's interview. And again, unclear why his interview at the Moscow Police Department with Sgt.Blaker was not videotaped like other interviews were. Not a word in the audio, and certainly not a word in Sgt.Blaker's report documenting what he had heard, what he asked the private driver, what the private driver responded. Not a mention regarding this 2:10:29 a.m. and 2:13 a.m. exchange. This is shortly before the start of the timeline of the crimes, ladies and gentlemen. I would venture, I'm speculating, giving an opinion here, that this is an important detail that appears to have been completely missed in the report from Sgt.Blaker. And by the way, during the audio conversation, it can be heard the private driver attempting to send or take screenshots of texts of his communications between himself and Kaylee regarding picking Kaylee and Madison up and one other young woman at 1122 King Road the evening of the 12th of November to take them to the corner club and then to pick them up the early morning hours of the 13th at the grub truck. No mention there at all regarding this other exchange that apparently happened later, according to Judge Stephen J. Hippler, between the same private driver and DM, one of the surviving roommates. And just as an added note, it appears that Sgt.Blaker knew or should have known DM's telephone number, because we have another report from him indicating, and this was later on, that he had been contacted regarding some text messages that he exchanged with both of the surviving roommates during 2022. It is unknown if that was at the time or after the crimes happened regarding interviews, or if this was some other time. All we know is that this happened sometime during 2022, and Sgt.Blaker's texts between himself and the surviving roommates DM and BF, described in his later report, have not yet been released to the public. If you have any thoughts, any opinions, any comments that you would like to share regarding this matter, please leave them here. And until next time, this is Kathy. Thank you very much for joining us here today.